Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now we've tested the RX 6400 and the Ryzen 3 4100. Both are entry level parts and neither GPU or CPU are particularly exciting. Some might go as far as to say that both are disappointing in their own way. In my Ryzen 3 4100 review, I commented that its launch was too little too late. Sure, it can play games, but it's outright destroyed by the slightly more expensive i3 12100. The RX 6400 on the other hand is okay, but it performs best in PCIe 4.0 capable systems because of its X4 bandwidth. In the PCIe 3.0 systems, its gaming capabilities are limited. Because of this, pairing one with an aforementioned Ryzen 4100, a PCIe 3.0 CPU, will mean that you aren't going to be getting the most out of the graphics card. A Ryzen 3 4100 and RX 6400 combo sounds like a solid, sensibly priced way into PC gaming on paper, but in reality there will be some problems. That said, it's not all bad, and today we're going to be putting this combo through its paces. Let's start with the good news. The Ryzen 3 4100 is based on the good old AM4 socket, so you can pick up a second-hand B450 board for example, and away you go. Even in pairing with the 6400 and with the PCIe 3.0 limitation in place, games like CSGO will pose no problems, whether you want to play at 60, 120 or 144 FPS. Fortnite, another online competitive shooter, will also run reasonably well, with a few minor hiccups that seem to even out after a few moments. I've taken to playing on low settings to maximise performance recently, though I do keep view distance on epic so that I can see those pesky enemy players before they see me. That said, with my vision, I'm surprised I get any kills. Still, for those of you who aren't visually impaired or suck at the game, this frame rate will mean that you can stay competitive. I've got to say that this combo is fairly quiet too, even under load, always a bonus in my eyes. Performance in Cyberpunk here will go up and down depending on where you are and what you're doing. It's best to have crowd density set to low for the sake of the processor, and it's best to have the graphical preset turned down to low for the sake of the 4GB 6400. FSR also needs to be enabled for the best experience, but we don't have to turn the game into a complete pixelated mess, which is always nice. Though you can still expect some drops below 30 with these settings. Elden Ring with native 1080p and the low preset with high anti-aliasing runs fairly well, close to 60 FPS on average with a few dips and drops. I've experienced similar 0.1% issues on far more powerful hardware, so the blame can't solely be placed on the hardware at hand. And actually, it's not too bad overall. It certainly did better than I thought it would. It's even better news for Far Cry 6. This does have the option of FSR as well, but I left it turned off here because I was fairly happy with the result at native. The average 1% and 0.1% lows were all solid, and even with the lowest preset, it's still a fairly good looking game. A PC like this certainly has room for upgrade too. The AM4 socket is sort of legendary in my eyes. It's been really good to me over the years. From my Ryzen 3 1200 to 1600 upgrade, and then 3600. It's a brilliant platform, it really is. I wouldn't hold it against you if you purchased one of these chips with a plan to upgrade later down the line, but as for the RX 6400 GPU, I'd perhaps consider something second-hand instead from AMD or Nvidia. There's a rumoured GTX 1630 apparently coming soon too, so we'll have to see how that fits in and what it offers when or if it's officially announced and released. Forza Horizon 5 is a testament to optimization. It runs well on such a wide range of hardware, and even here we can crank it up to medium and it still hits in excess of 60 frames per second. That's what I like to see. For me personally, 30 FPS feels fine, but if you're racing from a first-person perspective instead, then 60 FPS does feel a lot nicer, to be honest, but it's nice to know that we can still achieve that with fairly decent looking quality settings here. God of War looks good even on low, and it will hit at least 60 FPS thanks to the help of FSR, one of the best things ever to happen to those of us with more modest PCs. We could also go medium or higher with more intense FSR options, but sacrificing the sharpness of the image doesn't make much sense to me when it looks good at low with ultra quality FSR enabled. Again, those of you who are happy with at least 30 FPS can crank things up a little bit more at native 1080p, but if you can hit 60 without too much tweaking, then it's always worth trying to target. The less said about Deathloop, the better. Very low with balanced FSR 1.0 still meant a terrible experience. Way too much stutter and dipping here for an enjoyable gameplay session, even if we were to cap the frame rate to 30. A lower resolution is definitely best, but in combination with FSR or FSR 2.0, which this game supports, you can have a much better time than I did here. I stuck to 1080p for this test though, because I feel that being able to hit 30 FPS with 1920 by 1080, at least more consistently than this, is a minimum requirement for a PC built with new parts in 2022. Modern CPUs and GPUs should be able to handle this with low settings at least. This game is a worst case scenario example really. If you buy a 4100 and 6400, don't expect to play Deathloop smoothly at 1080p, unless you really hit it hard with the FSR preset. GTA 5 ran fine, of course it did. I did try out the May preview drivers from AMD first of all, but these caused some stutter, so I reinstalled the current recommended 22.5.1 version and everything was fine. Downtown Los Santos during rush hour ran with almost 100 FPS at the high settings, so no complaints from me. The advanced settings were switched off and the game sliders were set to halfway or just under, as is the default position. MSAA was also turned off, but FXAA was enabled, though there is a little bit of breathing room to enable MSAA if you wish. I was very happy with the performance of Red Dead Redemption 2. This ran with the Xbox One X equivalent settings, albeit at 1080p, with almost 60 frames per second. At least 50 anyway. Even the bustling city of Saint Denis didn't give our entry-level combo too many problems. I got into a bit of trouble with the law and had them chase me around the busy back streets without so much as a hiccup. This is a couple of years old now on PC, but it's still very much worth playing. I think it's one of the first games that any new PC builder or buyer should purchase, not only for benchmarking reasons, but because it's just really good. It can also be made to look quite bad to suit lower end machines as well, or it can be made to look phenomenal for higher end rigs. Here it runs well with respectable settings. Warzone with the low settings, normal textures, SMAA set to 1 and dynamic res enabled averaged just over 60. I used the dynamic res mode to target 60, so the game will adjust the resolution to try and constantly hit this target, which it seemed to do a pretty good job of most of the time. For some reason Godzilla is in this game now, which is news to me. Yeah, I don't really play this game much, but it's back in the benchmarks by popular demand, and for any of you who might want to put together a system like the one I've used today, you'll be pleased to know that Warzone runs just fine most of the time. But that's it. The Ryzen 3 4100 and RX 6400 certainly isn't what I'd call an exciting pairing, but together you can play games with a build like this, and if you have an AM4 board with an old Athlon rattling about in it, then the 4100 will make for a decent upgrade. Now I'd still check out used market prices of aging 6-core chips for example, and be sure to check out your motherboard support list too. As for the RX 6400 graphics card, well, it's okay. It could do with a price reduction, that's for sure, and I'm sure it won't be long before we see that happen. Again though, those of you with a solid second-hand market where you live should consider other options first, but I could say that about any PC build. I have a feeling that the Ryzen 4100 and 6400 will be paired together a lot in pre-built systems that are sold online too, so I wanted to sort of show you what you could expect in case you were wondering how this duo performs together. That way you know whether you want to go for a PC like this or whether or not you want to steer well clear. That's all for this one then. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know your thoughts on this combo in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.